Good afternoon. This is Julie Hibben with the Iowa Department of Public Health. We want to welcome you to this webinar on our SPF SIG closeout procedures. I just have a few quick reminders before we launch into the information we're going to share today. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the SPF SIG website after we meet today. So if there's someone in your organization that couldn't participate, it will be available to them. And all you have to do is just look at the training section of the SPF SIG website and look for the title of the webinar to find the information. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask as we go through the webinar today. I'll be monitoring the chat log that's on the right-hand side of your screen, so you can either type in a question or I'll pause and you can verbally ask a question. We just ask that you make sure that you are muted the entire time, and this is just to cut down on background noise. And you can mute yourself by looking at your name in the GoToMeeting toolbar that's on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a little phone or microphone next to your name. You can click on that and then you're muted. If you want to speak, just click on it again and you'll unmute yourself. Of course, if you don't feel comfortable asking questions during our webinar today, you're more than happy to contact me after the webinar's over, and we can certainly talk through any of the questions that you have. All right, we will go ahead and get started. So I just want to share with you, and you've probably already taken a look at it, but there is a guidance document that's available that covers everything that we're going to be talking about today, and the guidance document has just tons of detail included. So I'm really just going to be briefly talking about each item that you're going to be responsible for providing to us, but please take a look at the guidance document that's available up on the SPF SIG website. It's in the SPF resources section of the website, and there is a folder that's called Project Closeout. And so this guide that I'm going to be referencing throughout our time today is there. So all you have to do is look in that, and all the information is going to be available for you. Just I want to mention quickly that if your county is thinking about closing the project early because a coordinator is leaving the agency or something else is going on, I ask that you as a coordinator or your supervisor contact me right away. Don't just complete all of these closeout documents and then say we're going to be closing the project before January. Please notify IDPH right away if you're thinking you're not going to be able to complete the full no-cost extension. And the reason for that is we want to work with you to figure out a plan so that things can be wrapped up in a really neat way, and that all the expectations that you're responsible for get completed. We realize that some of you are looking for other jobs and that things are going to be probably shifting in the next couple months, and we want to support those efforts, but we also want to make sure that the project is wrapped up in the way that the contract states. So if that is happening in your county, please contact me or have your supervisor contact me so we can figure out the next steps. So all the deliverables that we're going to be talking about today are due on January 23rd, and this is a week before the project is slated to end. The reason for that is we want to make sure that everything's there, that we don't need to we wouldn't want to contact your agency if you've moved on to another position to say we need this, this, and this, or this isn't right, it needs to be revised. So that's why all of the deliverables are due January 23rd. And so we're going to be working pretty rapidly to make sure that everything's there, and then we'll be in touch with you if you have to make any revisions, and we ask that you do that in a very quick amount of time. If a coordinator leaves before January 23rd, the agency is still responsible for completing all of these closeout documents. So it's important that your supervisors understand that, and that I would really encourage you as coordinators to work really hard to wrap up things before you leave. Oftentimes in many of our agencies, you as a coordinator really have your hands on what's going on, and you really have that knowledge base, and oftentimes supervisors are just leaning on you to take care of those details. We had a few coordinators in last fiscal year that left very quickly, and the supervisor then had to figure out what they needed to do as far as closeout goes, and it was very challenging for the agency. So please make sure that you're working really carefully with your supervisors and completing all the details that are listed in the guidance document. In the guidance document that I've been talking about, there is a closeout checklist. It's on page 2, and that will walk you through every expectation of items that you need to complete. So that's really kind of your master list of things that you need to do. The pages that are going to need to be submitted to IDPH are pages 12, 14, 17, and 27. And so all you need to do is really pull those out of the guidance document and email them to me, and it's helpful if you can do that in one email, and make sure when you're titling each document you're referencing what it is and what county it's for, because I'm getting tons of them. So please make sure that you list the county name in the document and then the title of the document when you send it in to me. It's best if you can send it in one email so I'm not getting a million emails. I'm trying to keep tabs of all of these different documents for each county. So tomorrow there's going to be a webinar on the Triethnic Readiness Survey, and some of you may have participated in the webinar that we hosted last fiscal year for the counties that were closing out early. I'd still encourage you to participate in this webinar that we're going to be hosting tomorrow. Some of you weren't around for the first time that we did the Triethnic Readiness Survey. There's a lot of details to keep track of. So please participate if you can tomorrow. The webinar starts at 10 o'clock. It will be recorded and we'll post it to the SPF SIG website afterwards, but it might be helpful for you to participate live so you can ask any questions. So I'm not going to go into great detail about the Triethnic Readiness Survey because we'll be talking about those specifics tomorrow, but just some kind of broad reminders. Please do not start interviews until mid-October, and the reason for that is we feel like through the services that we're providing we can continue to build readiness and capacity, and if you're doing the Triethnic in August or September, there's still some services that hopefully can help increase that readiness. So mid-October is when we'd like you to start. You can certainly be identifying who you'd like to interview now. You could even be setting up those interviews or scheduling them, but please don't start the interviews until mid-October. We really want you to read over the guidance carefully. You need to be keeping in mind who you should be interviewing, and for instance, we don't want you interviewing coalition members. We don't want you interviewing people that have served on subcommittees. There are very kind of specific sectors that we'd like you to really be thinking about when you're thinking about interviews. There's also a specific number of interviews you need to provide for each priority issue. So look over the guidance carefully. That's all listed in that closeout guidance document that I've been referencing. Ask for help in completing interviews. Some of you have engaged your LU chair or your LU members in helping with the interviews. Some of you have also engaged the comp staff to do that, to help you with scoring. And a lot of the comp staff have experience in the Triethnic readiness process, so don't feel like you have to do this all by yourself. Of course, get your supervisor's permission, but there are some ways that you can engage other folks in this process and you don't have to do it alone. So there's a Triethnic Readiness Assessment Results form that you will be submitting to me, and then all of the interview documents as well as the documents from the previous time that you did the Triethnic Readiness, please keep them on file for at least a year after SPF SIG ends. So I would encourage you to give those to your prevention supervisor. We also are asking you to complete a capacity checklist, and this was something that we completed at the beginning of SPF SIG, and it was really to gauge how much understanding a coalition member, the coalition as a whole, understood about the prevention system. So there is a checklist it's also noted on the SPF SIG website, and I believe a copy is listed in the Project Closeout folder. But we want you to make copies of this checklist, complete it during a coalition meeting. It's just a list, I think, of 23 questions, and your coalition members can rate where they stand on those different questions. And then we want you to host a discussion about the process during the meeting and how it went. We'd like you to record some of the general comments that people made about each section of the checklist, and then submit the reasons for gap score to IDPH. And so there's a section where you can list the overall average score for the checklist, and there's specific detail on how to average that score in the guidance document. That was a request from one of the coordinators, so We just recently revised the guidance document to include that detail, so there's more information about how to average those scores in the document itself. But we want you to submit that document with the score average from the first year of the project and then this past year of the project when you complete this checklist again. And then also there's a section for that you can just write some general comments that the coalition members had for each section. And so we want you to submit that to IDPH. If you can't find your first year's checklist results, I kept many of those emails, so if you contact your supervisor and they can't find it, you can contact me and I can certainly look through my emails and see if I can find it for you. You will also be responsible for completing the final version of your evaluation plan, and so this will be the data that you've collected between June 23rd and December 31st. And we really don't want it to be cumulative. I think many of you provided data per time that we did check-ins, which was good. I think there were a couple of counties that maybe did cumulative. We really don't want this last evaluation plan check-in to be cumulative. We'd like you to list the data that was actually tabulated between the time frame that's listed on your screen. And if you have questions about that, you can certainly contact me or Amy Mason, our SPF SIG evaluator. In addition to the evaluation plan that you've been updating twice a year for the last couple years, we want you to submit an evaluation plan summary. And there's some specific questions that you need to answer, and it can just be just a paragraph for each strategy. I won't go over those specific questions, but there's an example on page 7, or the form to use is on page 17, and then the specifics, all those questions are on page 16 of the guidance document, and there is an example that you can reference if you're really struggling with how to write the information. So that summary and the updated evaluation plan should be submitted at the same time to Amy Mason. So those two documents should be submitted to Amy Mason, and she will be reviewing and getting back to you. And any questions that you have about the evaluation plan, also please contact Amy. And then ODSS data entry, we want to make sure that you've completed all of your data entry for the project by January 5th. And if you remember, all the services to be completed through SPF SIG should be done by December 31st. We really just want the month of January to be focused on project closeout, to be working with your coalition, to getting kind of your ducks in a row. So you should have everything completed as far as data entry by January 5th. We also want you to make sure that you don't have any red flags in the system, and this goes back to the beginning of the project. So if you've had multiple coordinators in your agency through your county, you need to go back and look at all of your entries since the beginning of the project. Make sure that they all have green flags. Every entry should have a green flag. If there's no flag or a red flag, there needs to be a revision happening. And you can contact me if you have specific questions about an entry where there is a red flag or no flag. I've got the review reports since the beginning of the project that I can send to you. So keep that in mind. If you complete all of your data submissions before January 5th, just let myself and Sarah know, who's the contact for KU, just so she can go ahead and review. So just email us both and let us know if you complete them before January 5th. If you don't complete them before January 5th, or really close to January 5th, like on January 4th, don't worry about emailing myself or Sarah. That's fine. Like I said, make sure there are no red flags. Every entry at least has a flag. And then there's also a system where you can export the data. And so I would encourage you to work with your prevention supervisor to see if he or she would like all the data. You can pull all the data out into an Excel spreadsheet that the agency can have. If you know that your coalition is not going to be using ODSS anymore after SPF SIG ends, then you can go ahead and export your data. Then your agency can have that, or the coalition can have that, or both places can have that, whatever you'd like to do. And in the closeout guidance document, there's a step-by-step process of how you can export that data. If you have questions about exporting data or about coding or things like that, feel free to contact Sarah at KU, and she's more than happy to help you, or if you're having concerns about some issue that you're having with functionality when it comes to ODSS. If you have questions about the review reports, contact me and I'm more than happy to help you. Oh, and let's see, Amber asks, the due date for indicator entries is December 31st also. Yes, if we can get them all completed by that, or are you talking to have them probably January 5th, Amber? Just make sure that all the indicator data is in the system by January 5th. So yes, you shouldn't be providing any services past the 31st, but make sure that your indicators are up to date by that January 5th deadline. Thank you for mentioning that. There's also going to be a form that's, I think, the last page of the guidance document that talks about lessons learned. And there's some specific questions that we want you to answer about how SPF SIG has gone. We're going to use that for evaluation purposes, and we're also going to be creating a lessons learned document that we're going to be sharing with the prevention field. And because we've heard repeatedly from lots of folks, they want to hear from you all, since you've really been the trailblazers when it comes to the SPF process, what you've learned, what kind of lessons can we share with the whole field. So we want you to fill out the form completely, make sure that you're at least answering each question. If you can provide a short paragraph for each, that would be helpful. Keep in mind that this information is going to be shared publicly, so even if you've maybe had some negative feelings about SPF SIG, please try to keep it positive. List people's titles instead of names. Being careful about listing people by name. We just try to keep things. It's very similar to what we ask you to do in our quarterly reports. Submit a picture of any part of your project. If you have, let's say, a strategy that's being implemented and the people in the picture are okay with you taking their picture and providing it to IDPH, please do that. You can take a picture of your coalition in action or at a coalition meeting. There's a variety of types of or pieces of the project that you can highlight. Just make sure that you get permission. Like I said, your agency should have some kind of permission form for having pictures taken of people, so I would utilize that process and make sure you keep those permission forms on record for a while after the project ends. And then any kind of policy change that you've seen happen through SPF SIG needs to be submitted to IDPH. And so if you're counting a policy change occurring as one of your outcomes, then we need to have a written document stating that policy change. So either, let's say, a school strengthened their alcohol policy, we would want a copy of that. If you had a community event that instituted some responsible beverage service training for their volunteer servers, we would want a copy of that. So please submit all of those with your documentation. And then also we will have your last final quarterly report, and I will work really hard to have all the feedback to your agency and to you before the 31st. There are a couple counties that still don't have previous quarterly report feedback taken care of, and I'll be touching base with you about that. If, especially from last fiscal year, we'll also be working with you on quarter one of this year, and that report will be due, I think, shortly. So if there's any outstanding feedback that you've had from previous quarterly reports, we want to make sure that that's all been taken care of. And when you're looking at your year-end questions, make sure that you're providing actual data for both your long-term and short-term outcomes. So you want to be reporting on both. And make sure that when you're reporting on both, you're providing data for the whole entire project. So that's, or your short-term outcomes would just be for this fiscal year, the no-cost extension, but your long-term would be for the whole entire project. So just keep that in mind as you're working through your final quarter report. When you review your ODSS data, we'd also like you to take a look at the breakdown of codes that you have provided services through. Include the percentage of codes for the whole entire project and why you think the coding broke out the way that it did. Don't tell me about the different types of services that you provided under each code because I could go back and look at that. I want you to tell me why you think the codes broke out the way they did. So please keep that in mind as you're completing your final quarterly report. Those two pieces are really important. I will let you know that we are working with our fiscal department right now to create a form through iowagrants.gov. This has not been completed yet, and I am unsure of the time frame at this point about when it will be completed. Our fiscal department is really working with every program in the department to personalize or provide specific questions based on either state or federal expectations for grants, and we have hundreds of programs here at the department, so that is a challenge. So if you want to get started on your first quarter report and you're concerned about that, you can certainly use last year's form and update it with this year's information, and then when the form becomes available, then you can just take the information from quarter one and plug it in iowagrants.gov. Most of the report is going to be pretty similar to what you saw last year. So if you're concerned about that, you're concerned about timing, you can go ahead and work on it now. And I will be keeping you posted as soon as fiscal gives the okay that that form is available for all of you. Are other people having problems with audio? Betsy is telling me that she lost audio. Can you just let me know that you can hear me in the chat box? Okay, people are saying that they can hear. Betsy, feel free to call back in if you're on the phone or use your computer. If you need to log out and log back in, you can certainly do that if you can hear me. Then lastly, we want you to provide a success story on the SPF SIG website. And if you look, and I'll show you at the end, we have a success story section of the website that we really haven't utilized, I'll be honest. But we feel like this could be a really good place where successes on the SPF SIG project can kind of live on. We're going to be continually supporting the SPF SIG website, so all the good documents that you've created and we've shared on that website, the announcements, the deliverables, will all continue to live on after SPF SIG ends. So your success story should really be a success in relation to a SPF step. So it could be a strategy you've implemented. It could be a success in the assessment step. Maybe your LU came together and really worked on some great assessment data sharing document that you were able to provide to all sorts of stakeholders in your county. So be thinking of your success story in relation to this, a SPF step. So we want you to at least submit one county success story, and keep in mind that information is going to be shared publicly. So keep that in mind. You know, use titles of people instead of people's names. Just be careful about that, making sure that the tone of the story is positive. And then you can submit those success stories through the website, or you can just email them to me. So however you'd like to do it is completely fine. So most counties that closed out last fiscal year, it was maybe 2 or 3 shorter paragraphs of their success. So just we want to definitely capture all the good work that you've done. So be thinking about a success story that you can highlight. So that is pretty much in a nutshell everything that you are going to need to complete for the closeout. And I'll just show you really quickly. This is where all the closeout, the guidance document lives. That checklist that I was referencing for the capacity step. And then the closeout guide is right here. So feel free you can peruse it if you haven't taken a look at it yet. It's It's about 20-some pages. There's also a section that references who you should be contacting if you have questions about specific topics. Debbie Seinhorst is really she has a lot of expertise around the triethnic readiness process, so feel free to contact her if you have questions. The evaluation plan and evaluation summary, contact Amy. ODSS export or other ODSS issues around functionality, contact Sarah, and then contact me with anything else that you may have. And this is the checklist that also I referenced that is really your go-to document as far as what you need to complete before the end of the project. So what questions do you have? And feel free to either ask in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and just ask out loud.
Julie, this is Amber. Can you hear me?
I can.
Maybe you've mentioned in the past, but refresh my memory, whatever sustainability funds that don't get spent, that money just goes back to IDPH, or I guess, is there anything that we could do to make that transition better as far as spending down?
Anything that your county does not spend out by January 31st is gone, and we will have to send back to SAMHSA. So you cannot carry over any more money past January 31st. So if you're concerned about spending out your money, and I would encourage all of you to be working with your supervisors if you're not maybe in the loop as far as what has been spent so far, to be talking to your supervisor and making sure that that money is spent out. If you need to make some changes to your budget, we'll work with you on that. Keep in mind that you can move 10% of the total amount of your budget without prior approval from IDPH as long as it's something that's already in your budget, like a line item that you've already included, like a specific supply or something like that. But if it's something you haven't included in your budget and you'd like it to be there and it fits within our guidance, contact me and I'll walk you through that process. Good question. Other questions?
Julie, this is Mabel.
Hi.
Hi. I'm looking at the evaluation plan. Closeout. Can you maybe pull that up and give us a little bit of direction, if that's possible? I don't know. Maybe we can see.
Yes, just a second. So Amy has suggested or asked that you include a separate column in the evaluation plan document that you've been using the whole time for the closeout. And so that's what she'd like you to do. And so you'll be including data from June 23rd through, or I'm sorry, the 24th through the 31st. And so you should be collecting that data. So make sure that that's all included. And then in addition to submitting that evaluation plan that you've been working on, then you would also submit the summary. And so I'll show you. These are the questions that the consortium would like you to answer about each of your strategies. And this is the form that you'll use for that. And here is an example of, this is actually from another county that submitted. So this is just a kind of a snapshot in case you're kind of struggling with what to include. So it really should just be kind of a one-paragraph overview answering these specific questions here for every strategy that you've implemented. Does that make sense, Mary Beth, or do you have other?
Yeah. I was actually looking at the Excel document that's on the website. That's confusing me. There's 2 columns and I don't understand what it means.
One is for, I believe that one is for,
I didn't scroll over.
there you go. One is for the counties that I think, or this was for anyone. This was for the last time you did your check-in. And so adding your new column showcasing what data you collected for the last check-in process or for those counties that closed out in fiscal year 14. And then this is for your last check-in. It's just showing that you can add another column. So in case people were confused about that, like I had mentioned, we had a few counties that were they were adding all their data cumulatively, which was kind of a problem because we couldn't really track every check-in kind of what people were doing and what kind of data was being collected. So it's kind of hard to know if you're making progress in all of your strategies if everything's just kind of thrown into one column. So most of you know this process already and you've just been adding a column every time you've done a check-in, but there were a few counties that hadn't done that. So not trying to confuse you, but that's what that's about. Does that make sense now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So we can take what we've had before and add a new column.
Correct, yes. Yep, you don't have to use this form. You can just use the one that you have, add a new column for the last, how many months of data, and then you're good.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. Other questions? Well, feel free to contact me directly or any of the folks that we have listed in the guidance document if you have questions about specifics, and we're more than happy to walk you through that. Keep in mind that if you do close out before the end of January, to contact me first if your agency, your county is leading in that direction, so we can work with you to figure out how to best do that. So we just want to make sure you're all successful and you get everything in, but we also realize that some of you are starting to look for other endeavors and moving on to other projects, and we support that, but we just want to make sure that you're meeting your contract expectations. So I don't see any other questions, but we appreciate you participating in this webinar today, and thank you, and we'll be working with you on completing all these documents in the coming weeks and months. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.